Hey everybody, this is Morgan J. Ingram. I have another special guest with me, bringing more special guests on the SDR Chronicles to bring you guys more value for your sales development careers. And I have Steven, account executive from Outreach. This will be Chronicle number 42. Super excited about it. I'm going to let Steven kind of dive into his background, and we're going to go into the topic today of how to effectively communicate within your sales organization.
Right. Hey man, thanks for having me on. It's like 5 degrees in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I'm remote, so this warms my heart on a cold winter evening. So Morgan, thanks for having me. You know, I'm a big fan of the show. I reached out to you, I think, when you had your first or second edition. So this is cool. I've watched literally every one of these, and it's sort of like a way to get my days going. So I appreciate you doing that and having me on. And you know, real quick, my background is I'm an old dog. I'm 39 years old, man. I've been doing this for 19 years, but yeah. I've never had more fun doing it, than when I started with the company I work for, which is Outreach. Prior to that, my background was, telecom, kind of the high-tech world. And the reason I was interested in talking to you is because I was telling you before we got on here, it's like we used to have, an inside sales team, but maybe they were making like 4 hours of calls a week for you. And maybe the criteria was weak at best, because it was just kind of like a triple effort role. And it was important to me because I thought, man, this would be great to talk to you about, now I'm living in this world where I have a pod with SDRs and the importance of communicating with them, right? And kind of having that rhythm, that sequence, that cadence, whatever you want to call it, on a daily basis, hourly basis, as we're all trying to do this together, right? So the SDRs are just sitting over here trying to book appointments. And you referenced it great in your last article, not to get too much into it, but about that handoff. So I think it's a great point to kind of start with is the handoff is critical,
Definitely. The handoff is super critical. It's just like the picture of the article. If you, in a track race, if you don't hand off that correctly and it falls on the ground, then you lose the race. Same thing from an SDR to account executive. If you don't have the right information, then the AE is going to have to do a lot of makeup work in the first 20 minutes. And then the rest of the call is trying to get discovery, and then it's too late. The person's not interested. So, right. I would love for you to talk about how you communicate with your SDRs to give you the right information.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I think that we all communicate, or we think we do. And I'm a communications and theater major, like I was telling you before the call. So, the way I think of it like this: when we first got a wireless cell phone, you were still, a youngin' at this time.
Yeah.
But I talk to this about my customers all the time. I said, you want to talk about productivity, whether that's account-based selling or ABM or sales acceleration. My first conversation, I remember sitting in the boardroom with the CIO of Target Corp, which is headquartered in Minneapolis, talking about a BlackBerry device. And his question to me was, and it was data only, no voice, right?
Yeah.
How do I know these emails are safe? Because I'll be so much more productive if I can send an email when I'm not in front of my desktop. And they had to go and take their BlackBerry and sync it to the desktop every time you sat there, and the data would sync to the computer. There was none of this like real-time stuff happening,
Right.
And so now you fast forward 18 years, and we've got Slack, we've got all these instant ways to communicate, which are great. But I think it's also important to communicate with your voice. Pick up the phone and have scheduled times and pods where you sit down throughout the day or the week or whatever that cadence breaks out to be for your particular company, where you're sitting down and talking about what's going on, the objections that are happening. And it's not like you're their quote unquote manager, but you work together to continuously talk about the objections you're getting. It's something we talk about all the time, in our pod, sort of weekly sit downs, but on a daily basis, I think it's just super critical to pick up the phone and be like, what are you hearing? What's got you down today? You've made 85 calls, nobody's picked up. Let's talk about it. Like, it's hard when you don't have anybody talking to you at all, because you'd rather have an objection than 85 voicemails, right? So let's kind of refocus. And for me, that gives me an opportunity as well, because, I might have 1 or 2 no-shows to the day or appointments that push. And like I was saying before, when we were kind of briefing on this, it's a great chance for me to step in and say, let me grab your next 30 calls so you can work on something else, because, that's how we win. And that's how we get the appointments to push that, push the pipeline.
Awesome. And that's awesome that you kind of jump in and add on those calls. So is that normally when you see someone just not getting answers on the phone, or is that when you see maybe somebody is actually doing really well and you actually want to be a part of that and you actually kind of jump in there with them? When do you kind of communicate to the SDR that, hey, look, I'm going to jump in and do a couple calls for you?
That's a great question. Both instances, right?
Right.
Because when you see your partner's down, you grab them, bring them up, and when your partner's kicking butt, you celebrate with them. And so I always just ask them, do you want me to help right now? Because if they're in the the swing and they've got 4 appointments booked for that day, I don't want to stop their momentum or their flow. And so at that point, it's more of celebrating, and that SDR battle cry, because every time you get an appointment, especially one that converts, man, ring the bell, bang the gong, whatever you got to do. And the AE, like if we in our company, which took me a little bit to get used to, I'm not going to lie, like if we do not report back in like 2 minutes, once we convert, interested prospect into next step, we call that a SAL, right? SAL. I mean, man, it's like people are tackling each other and like high-fiving and taking their shirts off. I mean, that's like that. I mean, because you can go all day without that. And so we really celebrate that feeling. So that's just another way to communicate, is like, we don't wait and say, oops, I forgot to tell you that one worked out. Because they're sitting there going, man, that's just made my day or my week.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. So getting those interests and having that evaluation, getting to that stage that we all want in close one business, what are you telling the SDRs that you work with closely to give you the information for? Is it, hey, send me the entire email thread? Is it send me all the phone calls that you have that are recorded within the cadences? Like, how exactly are you telling your SDRs, like, what information do you want before you get on that demo?
Right. So, well, I mean, as you know, I'm not going to sit here and advertise, but I work for a company where we have that, right? We have a tool where I can go in and look at all the emails that have been sent since the beginning of time. That's one thing. Have you heard of the new tool called Chorus at all?
Yeah, you mentioned it on LinkedIn. Right. I've never dove into it. Don't know much about it.
Not an advertisement either, but it's something we put in our stack internally. And
right.
So anytime an SDR is on a conversation with we haven't rolled it out to the SDRs that we're beginning with the AEs. It will literally pick up your conversation in your voice and pick up certain words, right? So your competitors, buying signals, anything like that. So I can go to a point in conversation and it literally will just bring me here and says, this is when Steve says, next step. And I can go in any point in my conversation, it picks up, it's like a rhythm, and it says, you say next step or something like that at these 8 points in the conversation.
Right.
And so as we roll that to the SDRs, we can sort of, our SDR, our director of sales development, Steve Ross, just came over. And this is going to be something that we're going to embrace on all levels, I can guarantee you, because it helps us understand what everybody's saying, so we're in sync. So we're all sort of saying the same thing instead of saying, well, this is kind of my variation of this thing, and I may or may not be 100% accurate when I describe this to you, because I'm super pumped to be talking to you.
Right.
But it gives us a chance to go back and listen to it. And it's this crazy tool that learns almost your behaviors to the point where, and you would dig this, Morgan, it tells me what percentage of the time I'm talking versus the time that they're talking. And it tries to load balance that over time and make you understand, like, if I'm talking 92% of the time, there's a problem.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. There's definitely an issue there.
Right. And so we use tools like that, and we're continuing to engage and bring those across the board. And I'm sure they have, other companies that are doing that same thing. But that to me is like a great tool to add to your stack that's simple to deploy and have everybody start to use. And then obviously from an account-based selling and account-based marketing standpoint, in terms of ABS, I'd like to go in and see all communication that's taking place on the accounts that they may be having trouble with, that they aren't getting answers. Because we all know you can frame an email certain ways. An email is certainly a way that we can garner a response, but I can't be on every phone call to hear what's going on, nor can they be on all my calls. So,
right, definitely. And kind of want to go listen to the essential theme of communication at the end of the day. When communicating in those, you talked about 92% of you talking on a call is obviously not good, because you may not be asking the right questions and they're not giving you the right value. What are you telling yourself, and then also what are you telling SDRs? What kind of questions are you telling them to ask so you can get there, right? Like how are you kind of telling them to do that? Because I feel like, from my standpoint, I know that the more questions that I ask, the more information that I can get and the more value I can bring to that prospect.
Yeah, I think the human nature, and that, I mean, that's how it's supposed to be done, right? Human nature is, I have someone who wants to talk or whatever, and I just want to get off the phone as soon as possible, you know?
Right.
And then all of a sudden you get off and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't ask them what CRM they use. I don't know if it's compatible. I don't know what their buying criteria is. I certainly don't know if they have any sort of influencing ability or if they're a stakeholder. And so, you know, obviously you recognize that those are important questions to ask. Just like if I'm an AE and I'm going into a discovery call, if I go right into demo and start to throw up all over them about features, like that's not happening. You know, that's
right.
Like that's phase two. If I can kind of level set and say, hey, my SDR said this, and all of our customers want to kind of say, let me see it, you know?
Yeah.
And you're like, man, I don't even know if you want to see it, you know? This might freak you out, you know? This is kind of like flying cars, you know? You're living in the safe space, and I'm about to show you flying cars. If I show you too much, you're going to probably like turn around and puke, you know? Because
right.
I'm going to open up the hood of my Corvette and it's going to be all crazy, you know?
Exactly. Are you ready for that?
Yeah. And I think that's a mistake we all make, is we're premature. It's kind of like, we assume, we all want to assume, right? And so not to go too deep and get methodical, but we all want to hang up the phone and be like, man, this guy's ready to buy, you know? Well, is this guy or gal the decision maker? And does this company make progressive decisions? Because I could talk to you, quite frankly, and you're quote unquote not a stakeholder in the company, but you are. You could influence a decision in the company without a doubt. That's who you are, and it's within you, right? And so I also think, you know, sometimes as an AE, we'll talk to SDRs and say, hey, I noticed you're trying to get in this account. Have you noticed that this person's super involved in social? Like, you might want to connect with one of their top performers, because if their top performer says, Morgan over at Terminus is saying this about Chorus or this tool, chances are he likes it, and chances are he's sitting outside the door of the VP of sales or marketing or sales ops and saying, hey, this is cool. So I think that, you know, our organizations are constantly growing. I mean, Outreach this year went from 70 to 142 employees in over 4 months. So we're bringing on tools, you know, sales enablement directors, just like I see with Terminus and other companies in this space.
Right.
And if we stop communicating, that's the death of us, right? And so all we can control is, I'm a salesperson. You're an SDR, you're an SDR manager, you're an SDR team lead.
Right.
Like, I'm talking to the SDR team leads as much as I am to the SDRs. And as long as we're getting that cadence going, past the rah-rah when we celebrate, you know, I think the understanding of what sort of questions are you asking the right questions? And if you're getting objections, if it's pricing, let's just take 20 minutes and talk about that, because your managers can certainly talk about it, but we're aligned and we have a similar objective. And I win when you win, and you win when I win. Why wouldn't I take 20 minutes right now and let's work on that, and let's go get a win today. And if we got to split up some calls, we're not stopping until we get a win today.
Right. So this brings up a lot of good points, because I like how you brought up about you're always communicating and you're always trying to get a win. How much do you communicate with the SDRs, the SDR team lead, SDR managers? And then the next question after that, the follow-up is, how much do you communicate with your VP of sales and people that are managing and leading you as well?
Yeah, I'm gonna bring up some notes on this, because I was thinking about this earlier today too, because I didn't want to talk about too much in our world, but I think it's sometimes you have to compare to what you have going on. So
right,
it's the end of the quarter, right? We're all getting like these people who are dropping out of sales cycles, or they're coming in because this creates kind of a natural deadline to say, hey, fresh start.
Right.
We can implement in Q1.
Right.
We love that. We hate it when they say no, and we all know no is not the last answer. It's just an objection.
Mm-hmm.
Objection is a way to open a conversation. But right now, I think to bring this conversation to a relevant space for all of us today, so when people are watching this on Thursday and get ready to go about their day, I'm communicating with our Vice President of Sales, Mark Consiglo, more than ever. And Mark is literally, and I have to say it's kind of funny, but we have this thing that says 10 million or die. It's our own company. You know, we went from 2.25 and we have a goal of 10.
Right.
And we were in Cabo, Mexico celebrating last week, and we don't do a lot of crazy expensive things, but man, our team is like getting together. We're pumped. We're coming back and like, we are doing this. Like,
yeah, For sure.
The last day we're up at like 6:30 a.m., you know, and everybody's drinking coffee, and we're like, all right, how are we going to do this? What's your plan? So Mark has himself in his basement. It's got like tinfoil, no sheetrock. And he's just like, I'm available all day. Just Zoom me if you need me to be on a call, because he's committed to communicate with customers and not just hard close deals, but truly communicate, right?
Yeah.
And so we are, between SDR and AE, we're doing like hot handoffs, you know, like, hey, this person might be interested right now. And something that Mark's really effective with as a leader, well, a lot of things, but one that I like is, for example, last month, we were a little light on a number heading to, and Mark doesn't miss, he's never missed. It's a great thing, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't want to miss, and we were in danger of missing. And so he turned around the SDRs, and we communicated to them that, hey guys, this next 6 days, SDRs and AEs, we're all bringing like down the minimum criteria from this to this. And so we're going to modify Salesforce, which is our CRM, down to every account that we're calling on to be right here. So we narrowed the scope. We communicated differently. Our messaging was different. And that's all we called on for like a week. And sure enough, like, that's who we were meeting with, you know, and it's those quick conversations, people who can make a decision quicker. And I think that sort of communication and that hyper availability that Mark has, because he's not coming out of the basement literally until we hit our number.
He's just there. He's just chilling.
He's got like, there's no paint on the walls. It's literally like, you know, just chilling in his unfinished basement. You know, he's always dressed to the nines. But he's like, I'm not coming out of here. And so the customers are like, is he for real? I'm like, he's for real. And when we hit 10 million, he'll head back to the office. But he's like, I'm completely free of distractions right now. I'm in my basement, and he's got like this UV lamp just hitting him, you know? So I think it's great. Customers get freaked out, and other ones, most of them laugh, and they're like, man, I get you. I'm in your situation right now, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's super awesome that you guys are very transparent and you guys are open for communication. So also kind of let's talk about when you talk about the SDRs, when SDRs are not performing well, is there something that you do to encourage them? Or do you kind of like give them a pep talk? Like, kind of what do you say when someone's like, you know, they've done really well and this like 1 month they just kind of struggled?
Yeah.
What kind of tell them?
So I think I did something different when I first started, and I've been doing this. I've only been in the game, as you know, for 4 months.
Right.
5th month, and I was lucky because we have a ramp quota, you know.
Yeah.
And I came out on gross ramp ahead of the 8 ball, and that was great. A great feeling to come into my 4th month being like, I'm ahead of my game, you know. And you know, the one thing that I learned was, you know, early on, I just kind of came up with some smaller financial spiffs. Like, if my SDRs, I said, hey, if you it's worth it to me because our company's already doing their own thing, right? But if I say, like, if you're going to get these appointments and they convert to a next step, you know, what I've done since then is obviously make a really big deal out of it and make sure we talk about the good stuff. And so the next thing will be the other conversation, which is tougher, right? When things aren't going great. Mm-hmm. But I gave them all a little financial split, just a little award card, right? Like, here, I'm going to send you this because I know it's important for me to understand your success. And that mattered a lot to them. That was just something I did. Everybody said, well, I mean, you're crazy. And I said, well, it's important to me. They're my lifeline. You know, if these guys aren't booking solid appointments, I'm not getting anything in my pipeline, you know? And so that was one thing. But you brought up a really important point. Like, when things aren't going good and you can tell your SDRs down, like, right. They're like, man, I'm really sorry. I've got, like, the holidays are coming up. It's been 2 days. I haven't booked an appointment, or God forbid, and they're good. And it's like 3 days. It really goes back to that positive conversation because, you know, their manager's already talking to them about this, right? We're all getting metrics that say, hey, if we do this, we'll get to here. And I think sometimes it's just backing up and having that conversation that's encouraging because, you know, I think even the toughest, biggest 340-pound linemen in the NFL still to this day are softies at heart. And you have coaches in the NFL who want to come down hard, but when you got a teammate who just kind of comes over to you on the sideline, it's like, you know, the punter or the guy who misses the field goal, and everybody on the team is just kind of like, really? You just missed a 25-yard field goal.
Yeah, it's like, wait, that was easy.
And I'm a Vikings fan, so, man, last year the Seahawks happened to us, and he's no longer here. Good. But he kept screwing up, so eventually the guys on the sidelines were like, no, I'm not talking to you anymore, man. I'm done trying to lift your spirits.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to make field goals, but it shouldn't be that hard, you know? And so those are conversations you don't want to have, but it's really about picking people up and vice versa. Our SDRs, something that I love about this organization I'm a part of, and I know you have this spirit in you, is like they're all about it. When we see an AE win, it's like we almost celebrate that less than we get when we get appointments that convert, because we just expect that that's supposed to happen, you know?
It's 6 o'clock.
And it should, because that's what we get paid to do. But they're super supportive, you know, and as soon as the meeting's over, the first thing I do, Morgan, if I don't have a back-to-back, and we create meeting buffers because we use Chili Piper for calendaring, so it creates a little bit of space.
Right.
Pick up that phone. Don't just Slack your SDR, you know, and say, hey, Sal. They're like, oh, my God, Sal. You know, call them and be like, dude, Sal, and here's what went well. And here's what we could have done better, I think. I think we could have set this up because they didn't give me this piece of information. Don't take it personal. This is where, I mean, there's things that I record all my phone calls and the entire company can hear them. You think I'm not getting hyper analyzed every day? It's all about getting better. But never be afraid to reach across and say, you did this awesome. You know, this is something that we need as a piece of criteria that we could do better next time. And the worst thing I think could happen ever is if you're an AE and you get on a call and the person, and this happens just because people are people, say, I don't know what you do. I don't remember why I even took this call. But you're like, well, at least you showed up. You know, that's the good news. So let me rewind back to the reason why we might be talking today. You know, so an SDR's job to prep that, make sure that they're going to show up for the meeting as much as possible, because in this world we all just move so fast. And then all the criteria, and then if it's not happening, just to communicate that is super important. Because if I just say, hey, my SDR, I don't feel is doing this, and I'm not telling you directly, that's super passive communication, and that does nobody any good. Whether it's remote, because I'm remote, right? So when I'm not on the plane, I'm in my home office or I'm in front of a customer. My SDRs are in State College, Pennsylvania. No, I can't go out of my little desk area and high five them. I got to communicate even more.
Right. Yeah. You got to be over communicate.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely, my man. So I think it's just critical. It's been, you know, if I could sum this up, it's been an awakening for me. Like I remember when I first came here, I'm like, are you kidding me? I have 2 people who are going to be setting appointments for me all day. Like that is so killer. Like I used to do that myself. And then like you don't want to say control thing, but the human nature is to say, when things go great, I'm like, hey, you're awesome. And when things go bad, I'm like, well, I mean, you know, we could maybe be doing this different. But if you communicate all the time, it creates that consistent, streamlined communication where even if I call you, I'm like, Morgan, what's up? You're like, this is what's up. It's just kind of an average day.
Yeah.
And I'm going to send you this little thing on this company that I got an hour or whatever. This is a company we're looking at. Check it out and let me know what you think. And all of a sudden, like, yeah, we should be putting on these 3 people on like high alert and aligning our VP so we can get some executive level messaging here in hopes of getting a meeting, because an SDR may not be able to get that. We should be doing that every day.
Yeah. No, I agree. I like that you are finding things that resonate with you and allowing other people to win and actually do, you know, learn more and gain more business acumen. I think that's super important at the end of the day, that you're helping people learn and grow in the role,
right?
Because it's a learning and growing role. That's what it is to get to that next step that you ever want to go to. So I think that's always super important. That
SDR role's hard, man. I was talking to a bunch of them when we were celebrating. I said, man, you guys, you have the hardest job in the company. I mean,
it's tough.
Dude, come on, 10 hours a day booking appointments every day for all of the year, you know? And
yeah.
Then next year and the year after.
Yeah, I was doing like a fireside chat, and, you know, someone was asking me like, you know, like how's this, you know, how are you doing this, right? Like, how are you always staying positive? And my thing is that, like, you have to face reality first, right? Like, the reality is of the SDR role is like, you're going every single day to the office or wherever you go, and you're knowing that you're going to face rejection.
Right.
Like, every single day you're going in there like, I know I'm going to get rejected today.
Right.
Like, and then when you come to that reality, like, that's when I think things become easier, because it's like, you know that's coming. So, like, don't get shocked when you get rejected, or don't get shocked when someone says not interested or unsubscribe or whatever. Like, that's going to happen. But the part of it is going past that to get the goals that you want and to see success in the role. And I feel like, you know, the role is hard because, like, the rejection happens every single day. And it's like, are you going to have the mental capacity to go past that every single day?
Yeah, man. The best advice I got, and this aligned with, I can't remember the exact, I mean, like I said, I've seen all of these. I've watched a lot twice, is Best advice I got, because I tend to live in highs and a little bit of lows, not like,
Right.
depressive, but oh man, how did this happen? Like, oh my God, my world's ending. And tomorrow I'm like, just kidding. Got a deal. We're good. It's like my last senior director, Dave Bezant, props to you, over at T-Mobile, who heads up their public sector and enterprise space. And
Yeah.
you need to get better at living in the middle. He's like, because you're like one of our top performers. And when you're high, you're going. And you take losses so seriously. And I know that it motivates you, but man, it takes you out of the game for a second,
Yeah.
Like, you're the guy who goes down and like throws garbage, and not literally, but he was just saying like, you're throwing garbage cans, kicking cars. And I'm like, I don't do that. He's like, but that's what I envision you doing, because I hear it in your voice. And he's like, so take the defeat and the losses in stride and live in the middle. And he's like, because you have a long career ahead of you. And he's like, and if you're choosing sales, and I have for 20 years, so I know I'm going to do it for another 20 or 30.
Yeah.
Live in the middle, man, or your doctor's going to be sitting there going, you might want to consider doing something else.
Like, time to change your mindset.
Yeah. You need to go be a Buddhist monk for a while. You should try that out.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Steven, I've enjoyed this conversation so far. One last question. The question that I ask everybody is, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to an SDR as he's starting his career, or his or her career?
Yeah, it's tough because I didn't start my career as an SDR, but I did in many facets. Like, we didn't have that title back in 2001, but when they first handed me a little phone book, and they said, hey, you're working for T-Mobile, and we're this brand new cell phone company. Now go knock out Nextel, and here's a paper phone book. Persistence was the key. I knew that I could make this amount of money if I did this. And it just ties in with what you said, Morgan. I knew in my head that I could do it, but I didn't know that it was going to take 100 calls a day and 95 people telling me to get out of their face, and they're not interested. And the second I got my first winning commission check, it got easy. And it always gets a little bit easier, but persistence, and I would say honing that skill is probably the easiest thing to do, because it's a super hella important job. It's like, focus on getting really good at that, and the rest will happen. Because, like I said to my guys on the beach when we were taking a little walk before we took off the next day, I said, be careful what you wish for, because being an AE some days, like, we don't get wins at all sometimes, like for weeks, And as much as I admire your job and how hard it is, it's like, you just got to like take it in stride. That's all. And, once you take it in stride, it kind of tie back to like living in the middle. Once you get really good at that, the sky's the limit, man. And like, whatever role you want to do, it's going to happen, because people are going to see that you're consistent. And man, consistency in this game is what's going to win every time.
100%. Well, Steve, I love the advice that you gave. I've loved having this chronicle with you. It's been a great time. I know a lot of people are getting a lot of value from this. Once again, I appreciate you so much for hopping on the show. As I always say, guys, keep dialing, and I'll see you guys soon.